Who is Azor Ahai Reborn? Melisandre clearly thinks it's Stannis, but might it actually be Jon, or Dany, or someone else? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. On this channel we dive deep into the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. Welcome. In a previous video, we looked at the prophecy of Azor Ahai Reborn, and concluded that it was probably talking about the same person as the Prince That Was Promised prophecy, which is helpful because that increases the number of clues we have to their identity. We obviously haven't seen the original text of either prophecy, but as far as we can tell, this is roughly the list of what we are looking for. Someone born amidst salt and smoke, someone whose coming is heralded by a red comet blazing across the sky, or in a slightly longer version, they will come after a long summer when the stars bleed and the cold breath of darkness falls heavy on the world. Someone associated with bringing a stone dragon or dragons to life. Someone who will wield the fiery sword Lightbringer. Someone from the line of Aerys II and his wife Rhaella. And finally, someone to whom belongs the Song of Ice and Fire. Now, immediately we have to recognise that some of these are rather poetic and open to interpretation. Born amid salt and smoke, for example. Some are capable of being manufactured to support a particular candidate, wielding a fiery sword, for example, and some are disputable about whether they really apply to someone, like the parentage one. Still, that's quite a strong list. And although we must keep in mind Tyrion's exhortation that prophecy is like a half-trained mule, it looks as though it might be useful, but the moment you trust in it, it kicks you in the head, it is indisputable that true prophecy does exist in this fantasy setting, and the identity of the person who will stand against the darkness and potentially save all of humanity is undoubtedly important information. So, who might this be, based on the clues we have? Melisandre, who has studied the prophecy, clearly thinks it is Stannis. Her justification is largely based on the ceremony she manufactured in that first chapter we meet her, under the red comet on Dragonstone, so lots of salt water and the smoke constantly emitting from the volcanic rock, and wielding a fiery sword she gave him. She wants to sacrifice Edric Storm, saying that it will allow her to bring the stone dragon to life, though of course we don't get to see that happen due to Davos's kind-hearted intervention. But of course, although Stannis can claim Targaryen ancestry through his grandmother, he is not of the line of Aerys and Rhaella. And both Salladhor Saan and Maester Aemon conclude that the sword isn't the real Lightbringer because the fire is a light show manufactured by Melisandre, not actual fire. I'm far from the first person to conclude this, but the idea that Stannis might be Azor Ahai Reborn seems to have stemmed more from Melisandre's interpretation of her visions in the flames and commitment to making him look like Azor Ahai Reborn than any objective application of the prophecy. So, probably not Stannis. But let's go down the avenue of descendants from Aerys and Rhaella, because that's actually quite a short list. For a long time, they had only one child who survived infancy, Rhaegar, and so, perhaps understandably, Maester Aemon thought Rhaegar might be the prince that was promised. As he says to Sam, "Rhaegar, I thought. The smoke was from the fire that devoured Summerhall on the day of his birth, the salt from the tears shed for those who died. He shared my belief when he was young." But then Rhaegar changed his mind and decided it was his son, Aegon. He became persuaded that it was his own son who fulfilled the prophecy, for a comet had been seen above King's Landing on the night Aegon was conceived, and Rhaegar was certain the bleeding star had to be a comet. Of course, Rhaegar died, so it's not him. His daughter Rhaenys was also pretty unambiguously killed. Baby Aegon, though, may have survived. There's certainly someone in the story currently claiming to be Aegon VI and invading Westeros. If that's true, he would have the ancestry and the bleeding star, and was born on Dragonstone, but no fiery sword yet, and no hint of bringing a stone dragon to life. And perhaps more importantly, there are quite a few hints that he actually isn't Aegon, but a Blackfyre imposter. I did a whole other video on that if you want to go down that particular rabbit hole. So, although there are surely more reveals to come there, for now I don't think Aegon or young Griff is looking likely either. With Viserys also now dead, that leaves just two people who have that important ancestry. Danny, and John, assuming we're all right about R plus L equals J, of course. John is an interesting one, because other than his parentage, and as a Targaryen and a Stark, the Song of Ice and Fire would work for him at a thematic level, he doesn't really tick any of the other boxes. No fiery sword, no obvious salt and smoke at his birth, no red comet moment, and no stone dragons. But might that all still be to come? I did another video recently setting out how I would bring back John from the dead if I were writing the story, based on how George R.R. Martin has set it up, and that could easily include salt and smoke and a fiery sword, so he would be literally reborn with that imagery. And if I'm also right that he might be the one to bring the Winterfell stone statues to life, that's another one off the checklist, if you apply the description of stone dragons quite loosely, of course. Danny at the moment probably has the most boxes ticked for Azor Ahai, though. From the right line, born on Dragonstone, so salt and smoke, reborn figuratively in that funeral pyre under a red comet where stone dragon eggs were turned into actual dragons. No hint yet of the Song of Ice and Fire or a fiery sword, but I suppose you could argue that Drogon is her sword, and he is definitely fiery. Maester Aemon certainly comes around to that conclusion. Daenerys is the one, born amidst salt and smoke. The dragons prove it. And although Marwyn the Mage is less convinced by the prophecy, he also swiftly becomes convinced that he must go to Dany on the basis of Aemon's conviction. There are other names thrown around in the fandom, of course. Tyrion and Cersei could both or either be illegitimate children of Aerys II, though of course that means not from Rhaella, which seems to invalidate that part of the prophecy. Some have suggested Victarion because of his smoking arm, and Moqorro saying he would be great in the service of R'hllor, but he's definitely not from the right ancestry and falls on almost all of the other counts. Like Jaime, Bran, and even Davos, who have their own supporters as Azor Ahai for various reasons, in the fandom that is, not so much in world. Which actually brings me to perhaps quite a crucial question. Who do people in world think is Azor Ahai reborn? We've already mentioned Melisandre and Stannis, but the person with the most who support her as Azor Ahai is easily Dany. We've already noted Maester Aemon and Marwyn the Mage. There's also Benero, the High Priest of R'hllor. As Haldon says to Tyrion, Benero has sent forth the word from Volantis. Daenerys' coming is the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. From smoke and salt was she born to make the world anew. She is Azor Ahai returned, and her triumph over darkness will bring a summer that will never end. Death itself will bend its knee, and all those who die fighting in her cause shall be reborn. We see Benero preaching to thousands in Volantis, exhorting them to fight for Dany. This is not just a random priest, it is potentially a continent-spanning apocalyptic religion falling in behind Daenerys. Jon, meanwhile, has no one believing him to be Azor Ahai reborn. Yet. That may well change when he returns from the dead, is reborn in the flames, as it were. And George R.R. Martin did something clever in his POV chapter for Melisandre in A Dance with Dragons, something very easy to miss. We heard her say in a Jon POV chapter that when searching for Stannis in the flames, she saw only snow. Then when we get her thought process in her own POV chapter, we get this. Melisandre had practiced her art for years beyond count, and she had paid the price. There was no one, even in her order, who had her skill at seeing the secrets half revealed and half concealed within the sacred flames. Yet now she could not even seem to find her king. I pray for a glimpse of Azor Ahai, and R'hllor shows me only snow. That emphasis of the word snow is mine because it's otherwise easy to miss. She searches for Azor Ahai and sees only snow with a capital S. The name Snow, as in Jon Snow, not the cold white stuff that falls from the sky. The others don't realise because they think she is talking about that, but really she means that when she asks her god for a vision of Azor Ahai in the flames, she sees Jon Snow. At some point, probably when Jon is reborn, she will realise what that means. The other person who seems to be on Jon's side secretly in the Azor Ahai debate is Bloodraven. I'll save all the details of this for another video, but basically he has, through Ghost and dreams, been showing John what he needs to do to face the others, giving him dragonglass, showing that fire kills whites, and even giving him this dream. He stood atop the wall, alone. "Flame," he cried, "feed them flame." But there was no one to pay heed. They are all gone. They have abandoned me. Burning shafts hissed upwards, trailing tongues of fire. Scarecrow brothers tumbled down, black cloaks ablaze. "Snow!" an eagle cried, as foemen scuttled up the ice like spiders. John was armoured in black ice, but his blade burned red in his fist. As the dead men reached the top of the wall, he sent them down to die again. Fighting against dead men atop the wall with a flaming sword, the imagery is pretty clear. He is awoken by a raven. Interestingly, Dani also gets an Azor Ahai-themed dream. That night she dreamt she was Rhaegar, riding to the Trident, but she was mounted on a dragon, not a horse. When she saw the usurper's rebel host across the river, they were armoured all in ice, but she bathed them in dragonfire, and they melted away like dew and turned the Trident into a torrent. Some small part of her knew that she was dreaming, but another part exulted. This is how it was meant to be. Using dragonfire to destroy an army of ice warriors? Again, the imagery is quite clear, and Dani is awoken by Quaithe. If you agree with my working assumption that Quaithe is really Charis Eastar, this gives us a very intriguing possibility that Bloodraven and her have been seeking for the prince that was promised on different continents and reached different conclusions. Bloodraven that it is Jon, and Charis Eastar that it is Daenerys. The two old lovers are championing and guiding different candidates to be Azor Ahai Reborn. So where does all that leave us? Who actually is Azor Ahai Reborn? Well, I think we can largely discount Stannis, Fagon, and the other candidates, as none really meets the criteria, just Jon and Dani. And Dani will definitely start out the next couple of books as the person most lauded to be Azor Ahai Reborn. She will be surrounded by people like Moqorro and Marwyn the Mage, with Quaithe in the background pushing her on, and tens of thousands of fanatical followers of R'hllor proudly proclaiming her the saviour. Jon, meanwhile, will have Bloodraven, plus probably soon Melisandre and maybe a few more who are there to see his rebirth at the Wall. Not such an impressive list, but he will be the one actually doing the work to start with, preparing the defences against the others, arming the Night's Watch with dragonglass and so on. Dani will need to be persuaded to join that fight. Indeed, she'll need to be persuaded that that fight is even real, but when she does, dragons will prove extremely useful, and no doubt she will appear like a real leader if she brings them and her army north. In truth, Jon and Dani will probably both do things that you would expect from Azor Ahai Reborn, and have people who champion them as that, as probably also will other characters. Maybe Stannis or young Griff, or even low-key heroes like Davos. As Stannis says to Jon, even Azor Ahai did not win his war alone. As is often the case with George R. R. Martin, the truth or right interpretation of a prophecy is actually less important to the plot than what people believe to be true. Melisandre's absolute belief that Stannis is Azor Ahai Reborn has had huge implications for the plot so far. If she changes her allegiance to Jon, that will also have huge ramifications. The same goes for the faith of R'hllor falling in behind Dani. Whether they are right matters less than the fact that they believe they are. That drives the action. Perhaps the people who believe that these prophecies are all or mostly symbolic are also actually right. Or perhaps Jon will drive his sword into Dani like he did on the TV show, like the original Azor Ahai did to Nissa. Or perhaps someone else entirely will emerge from the shadows to lead humanity against the others. Perhaps Jon will stand atop the wall with a fiery sword, and Dani will ride Drogon against the army of the dead. Perhaps all of these things will be true. We still won't get someone at the end of the story confirming for us unambiguously that one person or another was Azor Ahai and no one else was. Personally, I expect that both Jon and Dani, and probably a few other people, will do things that seem very Azor Ahai-like, and will have their own champions as the prince that was promised both in-world and in the fandom. Like after the first long night we had Azor Ahai, but also the Last Hero and Hakoon the Hero and Eldrick Shadow Chaser and all those other names, different cultural memories, and each of those names was working with others to fight the long night, who will also have performed heroic deeds. And so, although we'll all have our own theories, I suspect we'll still be able to debate who Azor Ahai Reborn really was long after the story has ended. If you'd like to see more videos like this, diving into the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, there's a playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.